The inner prison. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Carl Jung once said, "The only real danger that exists is man himself. And the most dangerous man is not the one who destroys the world. It's the one who doesn't know what lives inside him." Have you ever stopped to ask, what if I'm not who I think I am? What if even your thoughts were never yours to begin with? What if there's something else, deep within you, silent but persistent, that has been guiding your life from the very beginning, without your knowledge, without your consent? This isn't fiction. It's the science of the soul. And if you've never heard of it, it's only because your conscious mind was never meant to look there. Most people live inside a prison. They can't see a psychological cell made of unexamined memories, cultural conditioning, and ancient forces that speak through emotion, dreams, and behavior. They wear the mask they were taught to wear. They play the role they never chose. And in that unconscious performance, they lose themselves entirely. But if there is one name you must know to begin unlocking this inner prison, it is Carl Gustav Jung. If you're ready to confront the part of yourself you've always avoided, then it's time to meet the man who had the courage to look first. Carl Jung, the cartographer of the human soul. Carl Gustav Jung was born in Switzerland in 1875, into a world of quiet rituals, ancient symbols, and questions no one dared ask out loud. From an early age, Jung felt what most of us ignore, that there's more to life than what can be seen, measured, or explained. He would go on to become a rising star in psychiatry, and eventually, the most brilliant disciple of Sigmund Freud. But that partnership, though powerful, was never built to last. Freud believed that most of our problems could be traced back to repressed sexual desire, and that if we uncovered those early wounds, the psyche would heal. Jung didn't agree. To him, human suffering wasn't just about trauma. It was about disconnection from meaning, from symbols, and from the deeper layers of the mind. While Freud focused on the personal past, Jung was drawn to something much older, something collective, something universal. He didn't treat the mind. He ventured into it, mapping territories no one dared to name. He dug beneath the surface of the mind to find what others were too afraid to look at. Modern psychology often aims to fix, to restore normal function. But Jung wasn't interested in fixing you. He wanted to help you remember who you are. He believed the psyche is not a machine to be repaired, but a living system, full of tension, contradiction, and potential, light and dark, reason and emotion, masculine and feminine. All of these opposites live within us, and when we ignore one, we fracture the whole. To Jung, neurosis wasn't just a condition, it was a message, a cry from the soul, begging us to pay attention. Imagine two powerful rivers, one made of instinct, the other of logic, colliding beneath the surface of your mind. When they fight, you suffer. But when they meet, something deeper emerges. Integration. This was Jung's goal. Not balance through suppression, but wholeness through awareness. That's why he broke from Freud. Because while Freud saw the human mind as a battleground of urges, Jung saw it as a sacred landscape full of meaning, myth, and mystery. And so, he built a new approach, analytical psychology, a path not to adjustment, but to awakening. Instead of treating the psyche like a problem to solve, he treated it like a story to unfold. And in every story, there are forces moving beneath the surface. For Jung, Those forces weren't random. They were symbolic. They were ancient. They were alive. He spent his life mapping that inner world, not just with science, but with dreams, art, visions, and myth, because he knew that what shapes our lives isn't just what happened to us, it's what lives inside us, what we carry, what we deny, what we don't yet understand. And as he explored further, in that descent, he found something terrifying and universal, the collective unconscious. He found a hidden ocean beneath the surface of every individual psyche, a realm older than memory, shared by all of humanity, a place where symbols live, where stories repeat themselves, and where unseen forces shape our fears, our patterns, and our fate. It's time we go there, into the deep waters of the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious, the ocean beneath awareness. Most people think their thoughts are entirely their own, that their fears, dreams, and desires are shaped solely by personal memory or cultural upbringing. But Carl Jung challenged that idea completely. He proposed something radical, that deep beneath your individual experiences, there exists a hidden layer of the mind that is not personal, but universal. He called it the collective unconscious. To understand this, imagine your conscious mind as a small island formed by your childhood, your memories, your beliefs. That island feels like the entirety of who you are, but beneath it lies a vast, unseen ocean. This ocean is shared by every human being regardless of time, place, or culture. It holds symbols, images, instincts, and emotional patterns that stretch back through the entire history of humanity. It's not just a metaphor. It's alive, and it's shaping you right now. This is why people from vastly different cultures tell stories with eerily similar themes. Heroes on journeys, wise mentors, dark forests, monsters, sacrifice, rebirth. These are not coincidences. They are echoes of something deeper. Jung called them archetypes, universal patterns of thought and behavior that arise from the collective unconscious and manifest in every society. In every era, archetypes are not characters. They are blueprints. They are the psychological software installed in the human operating system. You don't choose them. They are already there waiting to be activated by life events, relationships, or crises. Think about it. Why does the loss of a parent often awaken something ancient in us? Why do we resonate with myths we've never heard before? Why do we instinctively fear the dark, seek the light, or dream of falling when we lose control? These aren't random. They're archetypal patterns being triggered from within the deeper layers of the psyche. And in the modern world, these same patterns are still alive, but they wear different clothes. You see them in superhero films, in video games, in religious narratives, in anime, and in folk tales told on opposite sides of the planet. They're not just entertainment. They are updates, modern expressions of ancient psychological truths. Even Marvel's Avengers isn't just a franchise, it's a pantheon of archetypes in costume. Each character reflects an archetype: the hero, the trickster, the warrior, the wounded healer. And audiences around the world feel it because those characters live within them. Even modern technologies carry archetypal weight. AI, for example, has become the new oracle, omniscient, cold, and silently worshipped. The collective unconscious adapts to the times, but it never disappears. It shows up in your dreams, in your instincts, in the stories that move you, and the fears that haunt you. This is why ignoring the collective unconscious is like ignoring gravity. You don't have to believe in it for it to affect you. If you don't recognize these forces, they still guide your decisions, shape your relationships, and repeat the same patterns over and over again until you finally ask, why does this keep happening to me? The answer is often found, not in the past you remember, but in the ancient structures you've never seen. Jung believed that much of our psychological suffering comes from being possessed by unconscious archetypes we've never identified. We think we are acting freely, but in truth, we may just be playing out roles written long before we were born. And among all these internal roles, there is one that is feared the most, the one we avoid, the one we deny, yet it is the one that holds the most power over who we are and what we become. Jung called it the shadow, and it is there in that darkness that your greatest transformation begins. The shadow, the hidden self you refuse to see. Have you ever said something in anger, something cruel, sharp, and out of character, and afterward thought, I don't know what came over me? Have you ever felt envy, jealousy, pride, or spite, but buried it under a smile, or justified it as someone else's fault? Then you have met your shadow. You just did not recognize it. Carl Jung believed that every human being carries a shadow, the parts of ourselves we've rejected, denied, or deemed unacceptable. It is made of everything we do not want to admit lives within us: our rage, our weakness, our selfishness, our cruelty, our neediness, our vanity, and our fear. It is the pain we suppress to appear strong, the shame we hide to be accepted, the impulses we silence to be seen as good. And the more we repress the shadow, the stronger it becomes. You may think you're avoiding it, but you're not. You're feeding it. The shadow does not disappear. It adapts. It disguises itself in projection, in the things you hate in others, in the judgments you make, in the stories you tell yourself to avoid looking inward. It shows up in the sudden anger that catches even you off guard, in the crippling self-doubt that paralyzes you, in the internal voice that whispers you are not enough. Most people live in the illusion of goodness, but goodness without awareness is just repression with a smile. I'm kind. I'm honest. I do the right thing. But that belief that self-image can become its own form of blindness, because the shadow is not just what you fear, it is also what you deny. And denial is the most dangerous form of ignorance. In today's world, the shadow often takes new forms. It hides behind moral superiority. It dresses itself in righteousness. It appears in the craving to correct others, to signal virtue, to appear spiritually enlightened while avoiding one's own unresolved pain. We see it in toxic positivity, the belief that everything must be light, that darkness has no place, that uncomfortable truths are a problem to solve rather than a mirror to confront. But Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it won't just haunt you, it will be you. The shadow you refuse to see is often the one controlling your story. You sabotage relationships, miss opportunities, and fall into patterns of self-destruction not because you are broken, but because you are unaware. Awareness changes everything. But awareness requires courage. You have to be willing to face what you once buried. You have to step into the mirror and meet the part of you that is angry, ashamed, jealous, manipulative, and entirely human. Because here's the truth. No one tells you The shadow is not your enemy. It is your unlived life. It contains energy, instinct, and potential that, if integrated, can become a source of power, not shame. It holds the pieces of your story you've ignored, and those pieces are the key to becoming whole. Working with the shadow is not about fixing yourself. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that were cast into the dark. It's not easy. It requires deep self-honesty. It requires that you stop blaming the world and begin taking responsibility for the role you play in your own suffering. But there is a path. Jung called it individuation, a journey of psychological integration, of becoming who you truly are beneath the persona, beneath the performance, beneath the mask. And that journey begins not in the light, but in the dark, because Jung didn't just show us the shadow, he showed us the way to reconcile with it. Individuation, the return to the true self. Most people spend their lives trying to fit in. They adapt, they perform, they conform to what their family wants, what society expects, what the culture rewards. They build a version of themselves that looks successful, responsible, admirable. But behind that version, behind the mask, something feels missing. Carl Jung understood this sense of emptiness deeply. He called it the consequence of not individuating. In other words, of not becoming who you truly are. Individuation is not about becoming your best self. It is about becoming your whole self. This isn't self-help. This is soul excavation. And ultimately, self-liberation. Jung defined individuation as the process of integrating the conscious and unconscious parts of the psyche, bringing together all the fragments of who you are, the parts you show, and the parts you hide, into one coherent whole. At the core of this process is the shedding of the persona, the social mask you wear to survive, to be accepted, to be liked. The persona serves a purpose. It helps you navigate society. But over time, you begin to confuse the mask with your identity. You forget there is something deeper behind it, a more authentic self that has never been given the space to emerge. To individuate is to break the mirror you've been taught to look into and ask, "Who am I?" when no one is watching. This process is not romantic. It is not polished. It is not marketable. It is painful because it requires the death of who you thought you were, the version of yourself you've been carefully curating your whole life. And in that death, something is reborn. Not something better, something truer. Every psychological crisis, every loss, rupture, or identity collapse can become a doorway to individuation. If you are willing to walk through it, this is what most people avoid. They want transformation without discomfort, awakening without disruption. But individuation demands something real. It requires you to sit with your contradictions, to acknowledge that you are both light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, confidence and insecurity. And here lies the paradox. You only become whole when you stop trying to be perfect. Individuation is the opposite of perfection. It is the acceptance of complexity. It is recognizing that your anxiety, your fear, your anger are not signs of failure. They are messengers. They are signals from parts of you that are still waiting to be heard. To ignore them is to stay fractured. To listen to them is to begin the healing. This is not a linear journey. There is no final destination. Individuation unfolds gradually, in cycles, through experiences that shake you awake and through quiet moments that reconnect you to your center. Jung said, "The encounter with the self is always a defeat for the ego." And he was right, because to awaken, you must bury who you thought you were, your idea of who you should be, your belief that avoiding pain will lead to peace. But when you give up the act, when you let the mask fall, you don't become less. You become real. And that's where freedom begins. Not in fixing your flaws, but in integrating your fragments. Because the goal is not to become someone else. It's to become more fully yourself. And yet, there's one more layer. Even as we try to become whole, there are deeper forces at play. Internal roles, patterns, and identities that we didn't choose, but that still direct how we think, feel, and act. They come from deeper than memory, older than language. They are archetypes, and they are the hidden actors in the theater of your life. Archetypes, the hidden roles in the theater of life. At first glance, your choices may seem personal. What you fear, who you love, what you chase. But according to Carl Jung, many of these patterns are not truly yours. They are inherited blueprints, ancient psychological scripts he called archetypes. Archetypes are universal structures in the human psyche, primordial forces that shape our behavior, emotions, and perception of reality. They are not learned. They are embedded, woven into the deep architecture of the collective unconscious. Across cultures and time, they appear again and again. The hero, the shadow, the wise old man, the great mother, the anima and animus, representing the inner feminine and masculine within us all. You see them in myth. You see them in religion. You see them in cinema. They are why we resonate with stories we've never lived, why we recognize truths in symbols we've never studied, why certain patterns feel ancient, because they are. But here's the paradox. While these archetypes live inside you, they can also live through you. When you are unaware of them, they take the lead. They write the script. They cast you, and you call it free will, believing it's your own. Jung warned of this danger. When archetypes remain unconscious, they possess the psyche. You don't just feel anger, you become the warrior. You don't just love, you become the savior. You don't just suffer, you become the victim. And in that possession, you lose sovereignty. Modern life has only added more masks to the stage. Today, we unconsciously embody newer archetypes. The influencer, seeking validation through visibility. The algorithm living reactively, shaped by invisible digital feedback loops. The savior complex, trying to fix others to avoid fixing the self. Each of these modern forms still echoes ancient energies, but they wear new costumes, more subtle, more seductive. So the real question becomes, who is playing the lead role in your life right now? Is it the true self, or an archetype you've mistaken for your identity? Because when you act out these roles unconsciously, you are not choosing. You are being chosen. And the more convincing the role, the tighter the chains. Jung described archetypes not as rigid categories, but as dynamic tendencies, forces that emerge in times of transition, crisis, love, fear, or transformation. They are the directors behind the scenes. You are the actor, following a script you never wrote. But this isn't a fatalistic view. It's an invitation. Because once you become aware of these forces, you can work with them. you can step backstage, look the archetype in the eye, and ask, what part of me are you here to reveal? To integrate an archetype is not to destroy it. It is to dialogue with it, to give it form, to see how it has shaped your fears, your dreams, your wounds, and your potential. And from that awareness, you can begin to direct the play, instead of being dragged through it. This is where real agency begins, not by pretending to be someone else, but by reclaiming the author's pen, because when you see the archetype, you no longer have to become it. And in a world that constantly pushes you to perform, to filter, to brand, to belong, this clarity becomes a revolutionary act. You return to center. You return to choice. You return to the deeper self beneath the role. And in doing so, you step beyond the noise into meaning. Because Jung didn't just give us a map of the soul, he gave us the tools to navigate it. And today, more than ever, we need those tools. Why Jung still matters when the world loses its soul. There is a strange emptiness in the modern world. Despite more stimulation, more speed, more access, something essential feels missing. We swipe, we brand, we perform, we numb. But underneath the noise, there is a silence, a hollowness. Depression is no longer an exception. It is becoming the atmosphere. And we have normalized it, called it burnout, called it ambition, called it reality. But Jung would call it something else, a soul that has been forgotten. In today's culture of hyperproductivity, we are drowning in dopamine, but starving for meaning, endless goals, endless content, endless comparison, yet very little inner clarity. We optimize everything except the psyche. Social media offers a new kind of persona, curated, filtered, socially acceptable. But Jung warned us about the danger of confusing the mask with the self. The more time you spend performing who you think you should be, the harder it becomes to hear who you truly are. And so, we scroll to avoid silence. We overwork to escape stillness. We chase status to avoid facing what is unresolved inside. Jung understood this dilemma long before the age of algorithms. He believed that modern man was in danger of losing all contact with himself, not because he lacked intelligence, but because he no longer listened to his dreams, no longer followed his symbols, no longer honored the language of the soul. And when the soul is ignored, it does not disappear. It protests through anxiety, through apathy, through strange compulsions we cannot explain. It speaks not in logic, but in metaphor. This is where Jung remains timeless, not just as a theorist, but as a guide for the modern crisis of meaning. Because while the world offers faster answers, Jung offered deeper questions. He reminds us that healing is not about fixing symptoms. It is about restoring contact with the inner world, reclaiming the parts of ourselves we have exiled: the shadow, the anima, the child, the seeker, and in doing so, becoming whole again. In a time when we are trained to look outward for identity, Jung dares us to look inward for truth, to sit with our contradictions, to decode our dreams, to live symbolically, not just functionally. His work is not a quick solution. It is a slow return, a return to self, to soul, to the sacred inner architecture we forgot we were built upon. Because this isn't just about psychology. It's about remembering who you are beneath the noise. And if you are still listening, if something in you feels quietly seen, then maybe Something ancient in you has never truly forgotten. The question is, are you ready to open the door? No turning back. You've now seen what most people spend their entire lives avoiding: the shadow, the hidden force behind your overreactions, your self-sabotage, your quiet shame. But here's the truth. You are not broken. You are simply unconscious. And now you are becoming aware. So, pause. Take a breath and write it down. Not for likes, not for anyone else. Just for you. Write down the parts of yourself you've tried to outrun. The urges, the thoughts, the regrets you'd rather hide. Give your shadow a name. Let it speak. Because, as Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But awareness is not the end. It is the beginning of a deeper initiation. So don't just study Jung. Become the work he left behind. Live it. Fail it. Integrate it. Start by journaling your dreams. They are the forgotten language of your soul. Write a letter to the version of you you've tried to delete and read it aloud. Not to judge, but to witness. Look at your social masks, your public persona. Ask yourself, what is it protecting me from? And who am I when I'm no longer performing? These are not small questions, but they are the doorway to becoming whole. And once the door opens, there is no going back, because now you've seen, and what has been seen cannot be unseen. This is the path of inner revolution. And if you're ready for what comes next in the next episode, we go even deeper into the dream world, into the mythic codes of your inner universe, into the symbols that don't speak but still call. And they may already be calling you.